To put this into perspective, if you'll pardon the pun there, Mr Robertshaw's comments came as he was discussing the development of policy on the Isle of Man with our political correspondent Phil Gaughan. He said quite a few of our senior civil servants are coming to the island from away, bringing UK thinking into their work, something he critiques. He then raised the example of our current Chief Constable, Russ Foster, who also came from across.
Perhaps it's wrong for me to say this, but I was shocked when the new Chief Constable from across came over and seemed, in a public sense, to be preoccupied with the idea of we have to manifest an evidence of gun-carrying policemen. And I'm thinking, no, we don't. That's not how the Isle of Man works. And he said on Manx Radio, on an early interview, I don't want to be the Chief Constable that got that wrong and something happens. Well, how often do we have gun issues on the Isle of Man, Phil? And yet that he was bringing the UK mindset into the Isle of Man in a completely different jurisdiction. And I think I'm so worried about the way the police service is going across in the UK now that where's the next Chief Constable going to be? We were successful with Gary Roberts, our first local Chief Constable, but the current mindset of Chief Constables in the UK, the police service, has gone sort of woke, I would put it that way.
Mr Robertshaw made reference there in his comments to one of Mr Foster's appearances on our Man in Line programme. I dove into the archives and gave it a listen back. This was in October last year.
We've not increased our numbers of armed officers since I've been in post. What we have done is change the deployment model. I did undertake a strategic threat, harm and risk assessment across the whole of the Isle of Man Constabulary, and I identified a number of vulnerabilities, and certainly a number of which I am not prepared to tolerate. So just some context. On average, it was taking 48 minutes to deploy armed officers to an incident which fitted the criteria to have armed officers deployed to it. Those officers are trained to very high standards, a clear discipline around the deployment of armed officers. And as I say, they are the most accountable, they're the most highly trained, and the threat and risk pervading the organisation is not high, it's low. But low risk does not mean no risk. And as I say, there are examples such as Cumbria, the massacres perpetrated by a chap called Derek Bird. There was the Rowmoat incident over in Northumbria, and the incident over in Devon whereby an individual shot dead 5 people. These aren't your big city areas of Manchester, of Leeds, of Bradford, of London, of Birmingham. They're leafy suburbs, and we're not immune. So I wanted that operational contingency, so I make no apologies for increasing the visibility, the accessibility and the responsiveness of those armed officers.
Now, we put Mr Robertshaw's comments made this week to the Isle of Man Constabulary for a response. It essentially reiterated what Mr Foster said last year on Man in Line. It said, the Chief Constable commissioned a review by an experienced specialist firearms commander to inform a strategic threat, harm and risk assessment in relation to the capability and capacity of armed policing within the unique context of the Isle of Man. It was established that the time taken to deploy authorised firearms officers to an incident was woefully inadequate. This informed the Chief Constable's decision to reposition the capability of those officers to be more forward-facing, enabling them to respond to protect the public in a timelier fashion. It added it's incumbent upon the Chief Constable to safeguard the public from such prevailing threats, and an average response time of 48 minutes was deemed wholly unacceptable. The Chief Constable also sent Manx Radio a comment. I've asked our own Mr Foster, that's Lewis, to voice it.
Whilst the former MHK is entitled to his own opinion in terms of armed policing, as the Chief Constable, I would rather rely on the advice and support from specialists in the field of armed policing to inform my decision-making and in so doing, minimise the risk to the public and maximise the safety of our officers. The commentary from the former MHK emphasises the importance of why the Office of Chief Constable has the autonomy to exercise operational independence when making operational decisions, which must remain unfettered from political interference. I am puzzled by the former MHK's inference that to enhance the effective and efficient deployment of authorised firearms officers is indicative of woke policing, and as the Chief Constable, I would argue that the contrary is true.
You can, as always, find more on this story and those statements in full at manxradio.com.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.